Good morning. I'm Wayne Motts, the President Emeritus and Historian at the Gettysburg Foundation. I'm with my friend, co-author, licensed battlefield guide, and extraordinaire, Jim Hessler. And we're coming to you this morning on a bright, sunny, but cold day on the Gettysburg battlefield for Pickett's charge for July 3rd, 1863. And we recruited a passerby to help us with some of this filming. Bob, thank you very much.
Bob from Endicott, New York.
Endicott, New York. He's helping us out, and we appreciate it. This is part of a new series we're going to do called Walking Wednesdays. All right, so what we're going to do here this morning is we're going to walk Pickett's charge. Now, we've got to let you know, be mindful of the park resource. On behalf of the Gettysburg Foundation, we're out here at a time when we're not damaging crops. So we just appreciate, for those of you that are going to look at the video, to just make sure that when you do this, you don't do it in the middle of the season and walk through the farmers' crops. And we're really grateful to be out here today, and we thank Bob for his help here. That's here. Jim, why don't you tell us, we're standing here near the Virginia Memorial. We're on Seminary Ridge for July 3rd, 1863. Why don't you recap a little bit of July 1st and 2nd?
Wow, okay. So obviously, as many Gettysburg enthusiasts know, fighting on July 1st occurred north and west of town. The Army of the Potomac was pushed back to Cemetery Ridge to begin the fighting on July 2nd. I don't know, Bob, if you're able to maybe pan the camera over in this direction towards Cemetery Ridge, maybe folks can get a view of that. Where we're standing, we're about 8/10 of a mile from Cemetery Ridge at this point. So on July 2nd, General Lee essentially develops a plan, and the idea is that he is going to send Longstreet's First Corps around to the south in order to partially envelop the left flank of the Union Army, drive it in, and also gain a position from which Confederate artillery can be brought to bear with effect. That position which Lee is trying to gain is the area that we know today as the Emmitsburg Road Ridge or Joseph Sherfy's Peach Orchard, in that vicinity. Hopefully later today we can get you some views of the Emmitsburg Road from this general area. So July 2nd, Lee decides that he is going to gain this position, drive in the Union left. Now we know today Confederates were not really successful in doing that. The Union left flank held after 3 hours of tremendous, ferocious fighting at Little Round Top, the Wheat Field, Devil's Den, and the Peach Orchard. So the Union left flank held, but at the end of that second day, Robert E. Lee and the Army of Northern Virginia, at least in Lee's mind, he did not feel that he had been defeated. He referred to in his report a number of partial successes that he felt encouraged him to continue the attack on July 3rd. And it's that July 3rd attack we're going to be talking about today. The partial successes included capturing the Peach Orchard and the Emmitsburg Road Ridge from Dan Sickles' 3rd Corps, and we're going to see how that ground played into Robert E. Lee's thinking and game plan for July 3rd.
Now, Jim, we should also say what this is going to be. This is a walk of Pickett's charge. This is Pickett's division. We're going to walk Armstead's brigade. We'll walk the center of it. This is not a Pettigrew and Trimble charge. That'll be for another time at Walking Wednesday. Stay tuned for that. And this is also will not focus on the Union defense. We'll go up to the angle. We'll talk about Union defense, but we're not really going to focus on that. This is going to be a walking tour or walking experience for Pickett's charge for July 3rd, 1863.
Yeah, exactly right. We're not leaving the Yankees out. We're not dishonoring Pettigrew and Trimble by not including them today. But if you want to have one of the most iconic Civil War experiences on any battlefield in this country, folks, it's walking Pickett's charge at Gettysburg. And that's what we're going to do today in the snow, in the cold weather. We're doing it for you.
Now, on July 3rd, Jim, of course, as you mentioned, after July 2nd, Robert E. Lee goes to bed. He thinks he has this plan, which is not what you and I call Pickett's charge. It's to assault near the left center of the Union line and then coordinate that over with the attack on Culp's Hill. But, of course, the Union forces there are going to preempt that assault on the morning of July 3rd. So Lee gets on his horse and he actually rides right down past where we're at here, along Seminary Ridge, and he goes down to visit James Longstreet. And from there, they go out to what is now the Peach Orchard. So the decisions made for the morning of July 3rd, early in the morning, are going to be made up near the Peach Orchard. Lee and Longstreet talk. You probably know the history of it. Longstreet is going to object to this. Lee says, let's attack. Longstreet says, how many men? And he pulls a number out. Lee does, about 15,000 troops.
Yeah, and I think as people are watching this video today, folks, check your hindsight at the door.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's so easy to approach this action and this charge and say, oh, it was a disaster.
Right.
It was doomed to fail from the start. General Lee, for better or worse, had a lot of reasons why he thought this attack would succeed. The ground gained along the Emmetsburg Road, the addition of Pickett's division to the attack force. There's a lot of reasons why Lee thought this would succeed. So check the idea that this was doomed to fail from the start, because on the morning of July 3rd, all of that was unknown.
Now, we don't know how many people were at this early morning conference with Lee and Longstreet. Armstead Long, Lee's military secretary, mentions at least 6 people by name. And in this discussion, Longstreet basically raises objections. Lee says, no, we're going to attack the center of the Union line, and Longstreet will be the operational commander here for July 3rd, 1863. Then Longstreet will get back on his horse and ride back over here. And at the same time, the last division available for Lee to use is coming from the campsite over here to the center of the Confederate line along Seminary Ridge. And they're going to take position behind or west of where we're at along the Emanuel Pitzer farm.
Yeah.
And Jim, we're going to give the viewers a great view of that,
because
we're going to walk back and we're going to take it. I'll take the camera from Bob. And
are we losing Bob?
No, he's welcome to come along, but I'll take the camera and we'll do the walk, because I know what the walk is.
All right.
So what we're going to do here is turn and walk over here, and we're going to head over toward the pathway behind or west of where the Virginia Memorial is located. Bob's going to get, this is going to be something different for you. All right.
Yeah, if they don't find all of our frozen bodies.
Yeah, as long as we might freeze to death back here. Now, this is directly west of the Virginia Memorial, and there is a little path that goes back and picks up where the horse trail is located. So we're going to go on to where the horse trail is. And the fence dividing line of the property between the historic Pitzer farm here at Gettysburg and the Gettysburg National Military Park boundary. All right. Now we're going to just take one little pause here so people can kind of see where we're at. There's Jen. And then we're going to take, here's the out into where the Pitzer farm is located. And then we're going to come right here, and without trying to get everybody dizzy, let's pan slowly. We're going to go into the sun. This is probably not the best time, but we'll come back around. There's the Virginia Memorial right there. So we're just, I don't know, 100 yards, maybe a little less than that. And we'll come right back and go over right along the fence line at the farm. So Jim, do you want to just kind of give us a little history of where we're at in the farm, and I'll pan back here.
Sure. So first of all, we should probably remind folks that what we're looking at is private property.
Right.
So you can't take a walk down there without permission from the owners. That is the Emanuel Pitzer farm, as Wayne said. Very often referred to today as the Brown Ranch, based on one of the owners who owned it from the 1950s on forward. Sometimes you got people on tours who mistake it for the Eisenhower farm because it's so big and prominent. But anyways, in 1863, it was the Emanuel Pitzer farm. Pitzer was one of the wealthiest people in Adams County. That was a farm of about 250 acres. And although obviously the structures today are post-war, it's been very much added to and modified over the years. Pitzer had some bucks. Now, old man Pitzer was in his mid-70s and in poor health, and he actually died a couple weeks prior to the Battle of Gettysburg in mid-June. There's one story that his children were basically waiting for him to die, although there's some research that indicates one of the daughters did actually grieve his death, so maybe a little bit of a popular fiction there. But anyways, when Pitzer died, the sons were still managing the property and some farms that they had to the south of us. So during the Battle of Gettysburg, the Pitzer farm was used as a staging area by Confederate forces. Certainly some elements of A.P. Hill's Corps were down in and around the property. The Pitzer farm today is generally marked as Hill's headquarters, although there's not a whole lot of proof to corroborate that one way or the other. But accordingly, Pitzer's sons, when they knew the Confederates were coming, buried about $5,000 in gold, silver, and some banknotes in and around the summer kitchen or possibly a bake oven that was on the property. And with all these Southern soldiers working around the property, at the end of the battle, the Pitzer sons found out that the $5,000 was missing. And it seems to indicate that a soldier from Georgia might have gotten at least some of that. So we know there's Confederates on the property. It's considered to be A.P. Hill's headquarters. But Wayne, for our intents and purposes today, you want to talk about George Pickett's division down there on the morning of July 3rd.
Yeah, hold that right there.
All right. So at the Pitzer farm, this is where Pickett's division will arrive early morning on July 3rd. So they camp. Pickett's division, Jim, gets here on July 2nd, basically late in the afternoon, and they get here too late to participate in the action for July 2nd. When Pickett arrives here, he goes immediately to General Longstreet, his immediate superior, to let him know that Pickett's division has arrived, and he sends Walter Harrison, his chief staff officer, to Robert E. Lee. And basically Robert E. Lee says, you know what, we don't need you today, but we're going to need you tomorrow. And they're going to camp along Marsh Creek, about 3 or 4 miles from Gettysburg, where the first shot of the Battle of Gettysburg is. They're going to get up about 3 a.m. in the morning on July 3rd, and this division, and we'll talk a little bit about numbers, Jim, but it's probably 5,000 men or less, but it's the only fresh division Robert E. Lee has to commit to this action.
Right.
For July 3rd. And Kemper's brigade, James Lawson Kemper, his brigade of Virginians, will lead the march on July 3rd, followed by the brigade of Richard Garnett, and then followed by the brigade of Lewis Armstead. This is a very long group of men. I would say that the total length of this line is probably 4 miles in a column of 4 going all the way back on this line. And then they'll arrive right up to here. And the front of General Kemper's brigade will be right along where this fence line is located. Notice that we are on the reverse slope of the hill, so you cannot see the Union line from here. We'll show that as we go out.
Yeah.
And the Union line cannot see you. And when they arrive here, stacked up in a long column, because they're going to be moving, this would be probably, there's all kinds of different times, 9 o'clock, daylight. It depends on whether you're in the front of this line or whether you're in the back of this line. But the back of this line is clear back at Bream's Tavern. It's huge if you're in the rear of General Longstreet's or General Pickett's command for Armstead back there. So then they're going to move up into this position, and it'll be about this time that Longstreet will break up that meeting. It's up in the Peach Orchard where this decision for Pickett's charge is talked about. We'll ride back here, show General Pickett a couple things. And he says in Battles and Leaders of the Civil War, I showed Pickett where he was to shelter his troops, how he was to move to the target, and what the target was. Right. So we know there was a target here. We know there was a scheme of maneuver here. And that will all be on the morning of July 3rd, 1863. And then the troops will move from here in a column, and we'll go right out to where we were earlier standing, and we're going to show you exactly where that is. Sure. The maps show a pathway through the Spangler woodlot on July 3rd, 1863. We know that they didn't walk out. Now, we're going to walk out to where the Point of Woods is located. If we'd have gone through where this pathway would have been, we know that's we know that that is an avenue that the Confederates can use without being seen by the Union Army. The way we're going to go, you could definitely be seen, but we're going to go on the pathway and move around. There's no trace of this original path left that we can find, and we've been all over it, inside the Spangler woodlot. This is the Henry Spangler woodlot for July 3rd, 1863. Pickett's men get in position without being seen by the Union forces, and that's key. That's key to what we're talking about here, Jim. All right, we're going to walk through here, back over toward where the Virginia Monument is located. See it right there. So we're just west of it. And we're going to come into where we were standing earlier, just next to it for the introduction part, what we talked about. To me, this is the best time to come to the battlefield because you can really walk and see with all the foliage down. And here's the Virginia Memorial, parking areas. And then let's walk over here. And if you look at the original old maps, so based on the Warren map for 1868 and 1869, you'll see the pathway that we're discussing that Pickett's been utilized and went through here for July 3rd, 1863, went right through here. So it's right off of where West Confederate Avenue is located, all the way over in through here. And now we're going to make our way out. We'll get out to where the Point of Woods is located. So let's move forward, Jim, as we do it. All righty. So we're going to go out for the Point of Woods. Now, if you take a look up in the distance, you can take a look and see where the Union line is located in the distance. These are some waysides right by where the Virginia Memorial is located. And then the left of the attack for Pettigrew and Trimble be right over here. All right, let's go. We got traffic up here even in the wintertime. Jim, what do you think about the woods? Now, this is the Spangler Woods, the Henry Spangler Woods. What do you think this looked like? I mean, the undergrowth, what would be your...
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think, you know, that old rule of thumb here on the battlefield that the woodlots today are too thick, and it's this undergrowth, some of which, even at this time of year, you can still see, which obviously would not have been here in 1863 because this was active farmland and it was actively being worked. But as Wayne said, the maps seem to indicate there's a trail, a logging trail of some kind that goes through the woods in this direction, and we think it would have been logical, at least for Kemper and Garnett's brigades with Armstead following them, to use that trail to traverse through the woods.
Yeah. All right, let's continue our little walk out there. Go ahead. You can lead us. Now, this area to the left is, I think, real interesting. So I'm sorry, Jim, let me come around here just so everybody can see where we're at without trying to make everybody too dizzy. But here is the Virginia Memorial. This is where we just came from. We were just west of it, back there where Pickett's men were lined up for July 3rd. And now this space between the Virginia Memorial and where we're standing on the pathway at the edge of the Spangler woodlot, this is the space that everybody comes across here today, looks across, and often walks and thinks that this is the area where Pickett's charge actually is. But what we're going to show you is that we don't think any troops actually made the march right here off to our left. The fence line that is off over here to your left would have been the dividing line for Pettigrew and Trimble. So right here where we're standing, this would have been an open area.
Yeah.
With Pickett's men being to the right of the frame of the screen and Pettigrew and Trimble's men being over here on the left. And then, and why? Because this area is open, because you can be seen. And it's clear that the troops don't have any shelter here as well.
Now, there's some indication, some people think Lee observed a good portion of the charge from about where the Virginia Memorial is. Although, again, there's some evidence, too, that he might have been a little further north of that. I think mounted, we can probably assume, Wayne, that Lee was in motion through much of it and probably riding and inspecting as much of the line as possible. But some folks think that he did, as we slip on some ice here.
Yeah, watch that ice. Go ahead.
But some folks do think that the Virginia Memorial's location represents the approximate area from where Lee observed much of the afternoon's activities.
Right. Now, this place is pretty well known where we're at. Right here at the corner of the Spangler Woodlot, it's called the Point of Woods.
Right.
And this is probably where General Longstreet himself observed where this was for July 3rd, observed the attack on the third day. Once again, we're here when there's no crops, which is great. So let me just pan a little bit over here. This is the Point of Woods right here. Here is into, let me just kind of pan around a little bit, into the Spangler Woodlot and back over to where the Lee Memorial is located, right over there. And we're going up here to the very left of General Alexander's artillery for Pickett's charge for July 3rd. Okay. Wow, what a great day.
Well, you sure got the sight lines today.
Yeah, we also should tell everybody that we've got a windscreen on here, but don't get, I'm sure we'll get many comments. Hey, it's windy out there. We're doing everything we can, folks, to secure this. Here we are at the Point of Woods, Jim. And, you know, once again, it's windy, so we're doing the best we can.
Doing the best we can, folks. All right, so what I'm going to do, Cemetery Ridge and the Emmitsburg Road are behind me right now. I'm just going to point out a couple of key landmarks on the horizon and give you an idea how far away they are from us. Wayne, I'm going to go south to my left, to your right, in that direction. And the Round Tops. Obviously, the most prominent landmarks on the horizon would be Big Round Top and Little Round Top. Those right now, Little Round Top is give or take a little bit more than 1.5 miles about from where we're standing right now. Obviously, on the morning and the afternoon of July 3rd, you still had Federal batteries up on Little Round Top, and we're going to talk about the impact that they played in the course of the action. I said batteries, but I meant artillery, Hazelit's battery, which on July 3rd was under Rittenhouse's command. So Little Round Top about 1.5 miles away from us. Wayne, pan a little bit more towards the peach orchard. And if we can get a view of that from here, I see a car moving in that direction right now. I see a monument or two just above the car. That peach orchard, Joseph Sherfy's peach orchard, is about 3/4 mile away from us right now. Now, I said in the introduction that Lee's gaining of that position, Longstreet's gaining of that position on July 2nd was one of the motivating factors that caused Lee to order an attack on July 3rd. So try to get a sense, if you could, looking towards the Peach Orchard and the Emmitsburg Road, that there is a little bit of an elevation over there. As Wayne is looking towards the Peach Orchard right now, you see in front of us a big red barn and a house. That would be the Henry Spangler farm. Now that barn is post-war, and the house has been significantly added on since the time of the battle, but the Spangler farm would have been here on July 3rd, and that will be sort of a dividing line when Pickett's division gets into position, Kemper's brigade, who we said before is in the lead, Kemper's brigade would form up on the other side of those buildings. So to give you an idea of what that would have looked like. All right, Wayne, pan over a little bit more. Maybe we can see the Klingel house on the horizon,
yeah.
Which is about, maybe about 6/10 of a mile away from us, a little bit closer than the peach orchard. See that in front of the round tops. Panning again, you might get a sense of the Emmitsburg Road Ridge as Wayne pans over towards the dome of the Pennsylvania State Memorial. And continuing in that direction, we see the modern barn of the Nicholas Kadori property. That barn was not here during the battle. The Kadori barn was considered to be smaller and white. Nevertheless, that is a prominent landmark on the battlefield today. And then keep panning to the left, we now see the famous copse of trees, which right now is about 7/10 of a mile away from where we are standing. Wayne, we really haven't talked a lot about the objective and the target of the attack. I feel like we should come to that.
Yeah.
But we'll come back to that. Continuing though, just to give you an idea of the lay of the land, notice around the copse of trees that Cemetery Ridge sort of broadly slopes towards the Emmitsburg Road, which sits in front of it. You might see a couple vehicles on the Emmitsburg Road. We believe that area of Cemetery Ridge, roughly running from the Pennsylvania Monument, the Kadori Farm, all the way over to the white Abraham Bryan barn over there, we believe that area was the target of the attack. And get a good look at it from here. They believed that the Union position might be weakly defended at that point, and by penetrating the Union line at that point and cutting it in half, the Confederates could then turn their attention toward Cemetery Hill, which is our last landmark over here on our extreme left. Now you can see a lot of modern buildings in front of Cemetery Hill, KFC, some other stuff, just to give you an idea of what I'm looking at right now. But notice a little bit of the elevation of Cemetery Hill. That would have been populated by Ziegler's Grove at the time of the battle, so it would have looked much different than it does today. And Wayne, that's kind of the lay of the land here. I'll turn it back over to you if you have any comments.
Yeah, I'll swing this around because I'm going to talk a little bit about, we haven't lost Bob. He's going to be with us because we're going to need him in a few minutes.
Bob from Endicott,
right. So listen, so now that Jim has given you sort of the lay of the land, we're bringing Pickett's men through the woods. Let's talk a little bit about the artillery here for July 3rd. Let's remember that the artillery is an integral part to the planning here for Pickett's charge on July 3rd. According to E. Porter Alexander, who's basically the de facto head of General Longstreet's artillery during the assault here, he says that it had a couple goals: to tear the Union Army limbless. So the artillery preparation prior to Pickett's charge, there'll be a cannonade, is to kill Union soldiers, take out Union artillery batteries, kill morale, make sure you lower morale there for the soldiers going forward. So this artillery is important. We're at the very left end of Longstreet's artillery line, and this would be the battery of Pickett-Woolfolk Jr. right here at the Point of Woods. The batteries that are in front of us, and Jim, if you want to just kind of pan around, the next ridge, and we're going to be up on it, that is where the batteries at the left of Alexander's line will go all the way over, and you can get the Klingel house and the round tops in the background, all the way down to where the peach orchard is. So E. Porter Alexander will have about 73 guns. Part of Reuben Lindsay Walker's 3rd Corps artillery will have 63 guns, and then you have about 23 guns of Ewell. And if I did the math correctly, Jim, when we did our study, we said about 159 guns. Yeah. William Nelson Pendleton, the chief of the Confederate artillery, says about 150 guns were involved in Pickett's charge. The numbers that we came up with here, about 159 guns from 3 of the Confederate Army Corps, all 3 of them, the 2nd Corps under Ewell, the 3rd Corps under A.P. Hill, and the 1st Corps under General James Longstreet here for July 3rd, 1863. So also the guns will end up, at least according to what Lee's plan was, supposed to follow up on the infantry. and we do know that there were about 14 guns, there's different numbers given, about 14 guns that actually went up toward the front with artillery to try to support the infantry, and they're not going to do a very good job at that for July 3rd, and that's going to cause problems here. So what we're going to do, we're going to leave here, and we're going to go along where General Pickett's men actually get into line. We're going to start at the left of where General Armstead's line is located, which is right here at the Point of Woods. That'd be the 38th Virginia, back into the tree line here. And then we're going to walk our way all the way down to the center of where the 53rd Virginia Volunteer Infantry Regiment is located. So let's take the camera, Jim. We'll give it to Bob, and then we're going to follow ourselves around here. So if you want to just hold that, Bob, while we're going, we'll walk down this way. Once again, we're doing this when nothing's planted. So let's come down here. I guess we can go right through here. You have to put up with how soggy it is.
Yeah, and the wind.
Now we know the 38th Virginia, there's a diary from Captain George Griggs that talks about how they're under a partial strip of trees. And then the next regiment in line, the 57th Virginia, is also. Now, why is that? Because if it gets out over here off to the right or to the north, they can be seen by the Federals. So let's keep in mind, this is all concealed. Today we walk out here, we think the Union Army can see us, and they really can't.
And maybe just give them a little bit of context here. So we mentioned before that Kemper's brigade was in the lead.
Yep.
And Kemper forms up on the other side of the Henry Spangler farm, which we talked about.
Right.
We didn't mention Garnett's brigade, so probably a good opportunity to do that.
Sure.
Richard Garnett's brigade then was next in line, and they came up basically about 200 yards or so in front of where Armstead is going to form. So that would be in that position, on the other side of the batteries where we were just a couple of minutes ago. I won't have Bob Pan in that
But
direction.
we'll get down there.
Because we're going to get there. We're going to get there. But what I wanted to just kind of mention to folks is then there was some indication that Armstead was initially supposed to form up on Garnett's left. And Harrison, the staff officer, says they talked about bringing Armstead further over here, but they realized that then he would encroach on Pettigrew's flank. And so Longstreet basically said, tell Armstead to go in the rear and he can make up the distance on the march. Armstead's got the biggest brigade in the division, give or take about 2,000 guys or so. And that's why it's going to be a long line that we're going to watch here along the
This will be in a double-rank battle line formation, and the distance of this is probably, Armstead's line's probably going to take up about 700 yards of space. That's why it's got to be back in this woods, because it's the biggest one.
Yeah.
So when they talk about this line of Pickett's charge being about a mile, clearly, if you put Kemper and Garnett in the front and Armstead in the rear, the front of that line is almost 3/4 of a mile, and then at least a half to 3/4. And then north of us, you're going to have Pettigrew and Trimble's men. So this line is a mile with a division in between the two, which is this open space that we talked about. Now, they'll meet in the middle of Pickett's charge. So we're going to have Bob follow us, come right down here, and we're going to go turn this way so we don't have our back to everybody, a lot of the viewers. But what's going to be cool when we get this camera next to us, Bob holding it, we're going to walk down here and you're going to see everything over here in front of us actually disappear, which shows you what Pickett's men saw before Pickett's charge, which is nothing, and what did the Union see, which is nothing, which is important. So let's come right over here. Woods. It's probably right here where Pickett rode in and actually got the order for Pickett's charge. We'll talk about that. Come on down this way. Come on over here to us, and then let's try to swing this around a little bit. Here we go.
And again, just pointing out, if you do this in the dead of summer, sometimes there's crops here, sometimes the grass is waist high, so this is, other than the temperature today, this is an ideal time of year to do this.
So let's come right up here, and hold this, I guess. All right, and what we want to do, here we go, what we want to do is we're going to walk down this way, and we're, maybe you better let me hold it here. I'll try it. because I'm going to sidestep it while we're going. So why don't we walk right? So Jim, let's keep in front here.
In front, okay.
And let's watch. Everybody carefully watch what goes on for the terrain here as we start moving to the south. So we're walking right along the front of General Armstead's line here.
And you know, Wayne, I often encounter people on tours who are often surprised. I'm sure you encounter them too. They're often surprised that Alexander's artillery is so far forward.
Right.
People come here, they assume the artillery is further back towards where we are or along modern-day West Confederate Avenue. But from the perspective you're getting now, you can see why that would be totally impractical to put your artillery back here,
right,
because you don't have the fields of fire, and why the ridge lines in front of us or to my left was such a better one for artillery. Unfortunately, though, the Confederates have to put their infantry behind the artillery. So during that great cannonade in the afternoon of July 3rd, those Federal overshots, you know, everybody always talks about Confederate overshots, but the Federal overshots are coming in here and landing in and among the infantry of Armstead's men and even Garnett and Kemper's guys who are further forward. And that's something people don't often think about, but hopefully you're getting that perspective as we walk it right now.
Now, Jim, the top of the Cadore barn, which was not the original barn there during the battle, where the PA monument is, where the angle's located, where the copse of trees are located, you can just see the tops of the trees at Ziegler's Grove. That entire line disappeared.
Gone,
and we only moved, ladies and gentlemen, about 100 yards or less over here. We're on what would be the left of the 57th Virginia, right in here. And then if we take a look here, we can still see the tops of the round tops. They're still visible to us, little round top and big round top. And then the red barn off to the right of the frame, which is the Henry Spangler farm. And in front of it is where Kemper and Garnett will be. So Jim, let's continue our walk down here.
Okay.
And then we're going to see that go away from the round tops as well. All that's going to go away. So this is I don't know if we like to I call it the real Pickett's charge. I don't know. I think very few people know that this is where the line is. And for those of you in the video or that are watching this video, we know that, you know, the best way to come out on the battlefield is get a battlefield guide, answer questions, and do that. We know that some of you will never be able to come out or physically unable to do the things that we're doing here today. So we're trying to give everybody a nice view on this of what it actually looks like. There's no substitute for walking the ground, but we're trying to make it as realistic as we can. Okay.
You know, Wayne, some of the accounts talk about Armstead himself during the cannonade walking his line, right?
Yeah,
to kind of steady the men.
And he'd have been right down here to the front of where this
literally
is.
Where we are right now.
So,
I'd say it kind of gives you goosebumps to think about, but since it's 25 degrees, I think I have goosebumps for other reasons.
But once again, a great time, you know, when you're out here to be able to do this. So let's coming down. Now we're just seeing the top of a little round top. Everybody you can see that. We've got the Klingel house dead ahead of us there. In the right of the frame, we've got the Spangler farm. So let's continue to go down here. We're walking due south. We're walking right on the edge of the Spangler woodlot, almost due south.
You know, if you can, it might be interesting to kind of pan into the woods for a minute.
All right, let's
just because again, that's a perspective.
Let's kind of
most people
stop.
won't get.
Yeah. So let's just come around here.
Notice a little bit of a ravine in our front.
Yeah.
My imagination right now can imagine a lot of Pickett's men, Armstead's men, kind of waiting out the afternoon of July 3rd in this general area.
And they would have been right along this line. And then they probably did go back in the shade of the trees because it's tremendously hot out here.
I know I
on
would.
July 3rd.
Yeah.
So here, that's where we started, up by the point of woods. And notice as I pan completely around here, The entire Union line has disappeared. You can't see Ziegler's Grove. You can't see the angle. You can't see the Pennsylvania Memorial. You can't see anything. All you do is see this ridge, which is out from the Spangler Farm, directly in front of us. And you just see the top of Big Round Top and Little Round Top. Little Round Top's almost perfectly obscure. And then here's the Spangler Farm. So that's a good idea, Jim. We make sure we get that all covered. There's a sure way to make sure these troops go forward in Pickett's charge. Don't let them see what they're going to hit.
Oh, that's right.
I mean, it's a morale.
Right.
Low, it destroys morale if they actually see it. Now, we know the officers actually did. Right. Were able to walk up and see some of this, but most of the enlisted men didn't have any clue what they're going to face here.
So you're waiting it out. You're playing cards. You're talking to your friends. You're praying. You're doing whatever you can to just kill the time. As Wayne said in the outset, Pickett's division, of course, was not here on July 2nd. Rand's Wright's brigade, Wilcox's brigade, some of those guys, though, had fought over some of this area late on July 2nd. And while Pickett was said to be very optimistic of success, some of those other guys who had tried to get up there on July 2nd and had been unable to hold it were not quite as optimistic. But as Wayne said, the rank and file, the average guy is not going to see anything. And from where we're standing, you can understand why that is.
All right, I think that this is pretty much near the center of where Armstead's line was. Now, we've got some of these trees blocking the view, but you can't see Big Round Top from here. You can't see Little Round Top from here. And you definitely can't see any of the Union line. And I think this is pretty much the position. You can see just the top of the cannon up there at Woolfolk's Battery where we were. Yeah. This is the position that Armstead himself is for Pickett's charge on July 3rd, 1863. This is the center of the 53rd Virginia, and this would be the center of Armstead's brigade. It's about 700 yards in length in a double rank line for the morning of July 3rd, 1863. And they're going to be out here from the morning all the way to the afternoon under the cannonade between 1 and 3 o'clock, and then in the attack starting at 3. This is where they actually start, from right here. And Jim, Armstead, we were going to lay out and talk about Armstead himself, right?
Yeah,
and Armstead's got a family member with him here, which very few people know about.
Well, he does. And Wayne, I want to give you credit for really kind of uncovering that story for folks. When people think about Armstead at Gettysburg, of course, the first relationship they always think about is that highly romanticized friendship with Winfield Scott Hancock. Now, we believe the Armstead-Hancock friendship existed, but people think of the movie The Killer Angels, they think of the movie Gettysburg, and, where these two guys are crying over each other and stuff like that. That aspect of it was very romanticized. What people forget or don't know is that Armstead had his son serving with him on his staff here on July 3rd. Walker Keith Armstead, known as Keith in the family, was a little bit shy of 20 years old, I believe, at the Battle of Gettysburg. He was a student prior to the war, but when an opening came up on his father's staff, basically our General Armstead had applied for his son to come and join him on the staff. Robert E. Lee seemed to take a interest in Keith Armstead's development. And one point in 1862, I think, when young Armstead tried to get some officer training, Robert E. Lee had endorsed it and said, "I know him to be the son of a brave officer." So there seems to be that indication that Lee did look favorably on the Armstead family. But anyways, Keith Armstead was here at Gettysburg, serving on his father's staff. We have one account indicating that he went forward with his father during the charge. Copeland Page, who's a courier for General Pendleton, says he sees Keith Armstead out here with his father. And ultimately, Keith Armstead did survive the charge, We know his father did not. We don't really know what Keith felt about losing his father here at Gettysburg on July 3rd, 1863, but Keith survived the war, and he later moved to New England, where he married, I forget, is it a daughter of Daniel Webster?
Granddaughter
of
Daniel Webster,
I guess to be a granddaughter of Daniel Webster, and lived for a number of years afterwards. So it's a family connection with Armstead that people don't know about and very seldom think about, but we would ask you to think about that as we're going through the charge here today and what that father-son relationship, might have been like.
Now I'm going to get in here. Bob's going to take over the camera here for a minute.
Right.
Thank you. And talk a little bit about the 53rd Virginia. Yeah. So Armstead and his son are here. Let's remember that Lee had given orders the men are to go in dismounted. We know a number of men in Pickett's division actually went in mounted. Right. And one of the reasons why is they can't command. This line being 700 yards long, how do you command a line 700 yards long if you're not on a horse? And you can't very well do it, so it's going to be trouble. Now we're going to walk the center, roughly, of the 53rd Virginia, which is the center of Armstead's brigade for Pickett's charge. It was under the command of Lieutenant Colonel Raleigh W. Martin. Colonel Martin was 27 and a half years old here at Gettysburg. He was a native of Pennsylvania County of Virginia. He is a graduate of medical school in New York, and he could have been a doctor in the Civil War. He decided to be a rifle commander. Started out, he was a captain of a company, and at Gettysburg, he's a lieutenant colonel. The colonel, William Aylett, who is the great-grandson, I think I got that right, of Patrick Henry. I can't remember. No, not Patrick Henry. Which one is it? Now,
my brain is frozen. I don't know.
I think William Aylett, who's related to the Revolutionary War figure, is wounded here, and Lieutenant Colonel Martin will take over.
Okay.
We're standing where the center of that flag would have been. The flag is still around. It was captured here in Pickett's charge. We're going to start where it started. We're going to end where it ended. And according to one of the color bearers, James Carter was the color bearer of the 53rd Virginia that survived Pickett's charge. He said there were 10 men. Roughly there were 10 men carrying this flag. 8 of them died trying to get this across the field. And the first one was Linder Blackburn, standing right here where we're at, Jim, on July 3rd, 1863. Now, the cannonade happens 1 to 3 o'clock. So 1 o'clock, the cannons will start. About 159, that's what we talked, over 150 Confederate guns, about 80 to 90 Union guns, depending on what it is. That cannonade will go for 2 hours. It'll be pretty much ineffectual. The smoke will obscure the field, and every overshot that the Union Army does comes back here into the line. Now, Armstead's men will take less casualties because they're not right up where Garnett's and Kemper's men are, and we'll show you where that is. When that cannonade ceases, about 3 p.m. on July 3rd, Pickett will ride into the Point of Woods. He'll get the order, and he'll ride right across here. Armstead will order all the men up to attention. And he and Colonel Martin are standing right next to Linder Blackburn, the color bearer of the 53rd Virginia. And Armstead will ask Blackburn, are you going to place this flag on yonder enemy works? And a great quote from Blackburn, he said, if mortal man can do it, sir, it shall be done. And Armstead reached into his coat, pulled out a flask, opened it up, and gave Blackburn a drink of alcohol. And one of the, James Carter, who's in the color guard, said, I wish Armstead would have passed that around. I guess the color guard wanted Armstead to pass that around.
If we could use some of that today, I'll tell you.
Because he knows, unfortunately for these guys, that's a funny moment when you think about, wow, he's giving him a drink. But the reality is, they know many of these men aren't going to make it through the day here on July 3rd. Armstead will seal that up. He'll order his men. He'll give a little talk. Remember your wives, your sweethearts. That's pretty accurate what he does. And then he will step off on foot. And these men here, Jim, will be going at the quick time at about 3 p.m. on July 3rd. That's 110 steps a minute. They'll be covering a lot faster than we're going to go with the camera. And Garnett and Kemper's men will be basically at the common time to try to go forward here. Whether Armstead's to come up on the left or not, that's been discussed. Maybe he's going to close this gap. He's not going to quite make it there, but he himself is going to be on foot. His son will at least be in part of this attack. that we know of. But this is where the start of Pickett's charge actually comes at 3 p.m., the center of the 53rd Virginia line right here.
And you know, I'm thinking as I'm standing here listening to you, maybe if we have Bob pan in that direction one last time, because you know, from the charge perspective, just to point out, over on our left, you have Pettigrew and Trimble. Can't see them. Cannot see them. In front of you, you have Garnett right now. Cannot see them. Cannot see the target. As Wayne pointed out before, you've got some modern day shrubs and trees over here on the right. You might have had a better view of Kemper's brigade and even Wilcox and Lang along the Emmitsburg Road. We haven't talked about those guys. But you really are down in a hole over here. You just don't see a whole lot. And that's why, Wayne, isn't it? It's so important then you have to follow the officers and you have to follow the flags, because that's all you've got to kind of lead you in the right direction.
The flags are the symbols, and we didn't talk about the dress of the attack, but the dress or direction of this attack for July 3rd will be over to the north, right at the Point of Woods, and Pettigrew's division, which would be Archer's brigade. General Archer's captured on July 1st, so it'll be under Burkett Fry, the colonel of the 13th Alabama, and according to the records we have, that will be the center direction. So everybody that is over here is dressing to the left or north, to the left of the frame that you're looking at. Everybody on Pettigrew is dressing to the right, and these lines are going to eventually try to come together, will come together over in the center of the field.
And that dress in that direction, folks, is towards Cemetery Ridge. It is not towards Ziegler's Grove. It is not towards Cemetery Hill. It is towards Cemetery Ridge. I know there's some folks who wouldn't agree with us on that, but
I mean, our belief is that the place that the Confederates are going to strike this line, the intended place, will be at the angle up near where the copse of trees is located. And it's possible that, you know, the evidence seems to suggest Cemetery Hill is the final strategic objective for this assault. But the tactical breakthrough here is going to be right up at the angle and at the copse of trees, and not further north here. I think all the evidence shows that. Why is Kemper that far to the south if it's going to be that far to the north? And they're going to move in different fashions to get there, using these ridges, like the ridge that's behind Gemini, as protection from this artillery for July 3rd. So at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we know it's about 87 degrees, according to Professor Michael Jacobs. We know from recent studies by one of our colleagues, Jeff Harding, that the humidity, the field temperature here is well over 100 degrees. The wet ball, that's what he called it. And it's well over 100 degrees, and July 3rd was like the hottest day of the month for July, and these men are in 100% wool uniforms. They've been out here from the morning of July 3rd all the way through the cannonade between 1 and 3 o'clock, and then at 3 o'clock for this attack, Jim.
And look, there's no shelter, none at all. I mean, look at it.
So unless you're the left of Armstead, you're the only place that has any shelter trees. Kemper and Garnett are completely in the open, and only 1.5 regiments of Armstead, the 38th and 57th Virginia, part of it, will be under tree cover.
And guys talk about it. They talk about guys falling out of the ranks because of heat stroke, and you can easily understand that.
All right, so now we're going to I'll take this, and we'll all walk now.
Okay.
And we'll come up here toward the center. All right.
Now, folks,
this would be the exact march that Armstead and the 53rd Virginia and the rest of the men will be taking. And they'll be moving and then move on the oblique, almost at a 45-degree angle as we get up here. Now, once we get past these scrubs over here, let's look over here to the right, because you can't see Big Round Top. Now, you can see the red of the Spangler barn. See pretty much the top of it. That's a replacement barn. The barn caught on fire during the time of the battle. That is a National Park Service site. We do tell everyone that these are private residences, so please don't go up into people's homes.
Trained professionals, folks. Trained professionals. All right, now, right off the bat, though, we're going uphill, and now I see the top of the Pennsylvania Memorial again.
You can see it. See just the top of the Kadori barn, but once again, the barn that was there in the battle wouldn't have been that tall. So,
look, I don't want to get hung up on trees and the copse of trees, because I do not think that was the objective of the attack. But notice as you get up to these ridge lines, you start to see the tops of trees,
Right.
and that's why they would be targets, at least something to directionally aim towards.
Yeah, Walter Harrison says it was a convenient, I don't know if he uses those words, point of direction.
Right.
Is basically what he says. So we know that that's going to be something that people are aiming at, or something that they can see, because it's pretty much all alone out there. All right, here we are. Come up at the top of the ridge. Now we can see Big Round Top. Come over here, we can see the Spangler Farm. But we should know, Jim, that when we're advancing with Armstead here after 3 o'clock on July 3rd, that Garnett and Kemper are already moving forward.
Yep.
So the target for the Union artillery here on July 3rd is a lot with Garnett and Kemper, because they're in the front.
Right.
So we're gonna go more on this. Let's if this isn't off the beaten path, I don't know what is. Once again, nothing planted out here, so this is a good, don't do this
Do this during the dead
when
of
their
summer.
stuff is planted.
And you'd come home in the summertime covered in a brigade of ticks. So you wouldn't want
Yeah,
to do this.
that's right. That's the other thing we should say. You know, when you're out here in the summertime, there are a lot of ticks out here in Pickett's Charge. You got to be careful with that. Okay. Now we're going to drop down into where General Garnett's line will be. As Jim said, there's a ridge separating where Armstead and General Garnett are located.
About 200-yard distance.
And so by the time Armstead's men have actually gone through here, in the march, Garnett's men have already left this position and are up in front of us. Now that ridge line in front of us is going to be where the artillery is. We got a little lake we got to negotiate here. Okay. Okay. Now let's come up just a hair bit, sort of hug the ridge line here. All right, Jim, maybe right in here we just see the top of Big Round Top. All right, let's go over, let's just pan out.
Okay.
Just give me a second here. Let's go over here to the Spangler Farm, right here. We just walked from where the Spangler Woods is located. There's the point of woods up in the distance. We'll just, it's full circle 360 here. And notice you can't see any of that line. So we're here at General Richard Garnett's position. See just the top of the copse here.
Just the top of the modern Kadori barn, barely.
Right, and then we're going further back over to here. All right, boy, it's windy. I hope that wind suppressor's working.
We'll find out. Are we ready to go?
Yeah, so let's talk about Richard Garnett, Jim, because we're right here in about the center, maybe not quite the center of where Richard Garnett started. We walked from Armstead up a couple hundred yards down into this low area, and now the Spangler Farm is over here behind us, and the view where Bob is holding the camera is looking south right now.
Yeah. So before we get into Garnett, as we've said a couple of times, Brigadier General James Kemper's brigade would have been forming up behind us on the other side of the Spangler property. Oh, give or take, I think about 1,600 men in formation. Roughly then, on a line coming over this way, as we've said, would have been where Brigadier General Richard Garnett's brigade of about 1,500 men or so would have been formed up. Garnett at Gettysburg was about 45 years old. Virginia native, kind of a middling student at West Point. There was one account that said something to the effect of he was not a great mental force, but he was one of the bravest men I ever knew. Good soldier. Of course, in 1862 at the Battle of Kernstown, while he was leading Stonewall Jackson's old brigade, he had ordered his men to retreat, and Jackson had brought him up on charges afterwards. Many people kind of feel that being brought up on charges had kind of chafed at Garnett's proud spirit, and that he was possibly looking for an opportunity to redeem himself on a battlefield such as Gettysburg. Now, on July 3rd, 1863, Garnett was mounted. They make a big deal about that in the movie Gettysburg, but actually he was probably about one of 15 men or so.
Right.
That were mounted during the assault, but Garnett would have been mounted on his horse Red Eye, and he was mounted because during the march up north, he had been kicked in the ankle by either a horse or a mule, and it was giving him a lot of difficulty in walking, so he had to ride the charge. So you got Garnett in front of Armstead. We at least think he's looking for an opportunity to redeem himself, and he's having great difficulty walking on July 3rd as he moves out here with his brigade.
Now, he got kicked by a horse, right, Jim?
Yeah.
He was kicked by a horse, and then there's some accounts that he may have been feverish sick, but it doesn't look like that is the case. I don't think that's right. I mean, is that sort of the best evidence?
Yeah, there's varying accounts on that, but there is one account where somebody was riding with him and said he was kind of, it was a very hot day, as we've said, but that he was kind of buttoned up like in his coat because maybe he was feverish and not feeling well that day. But as Wayne said, there's some conflicting accounts on that.
So he's on his big thoroughbred bay, Red Eye, and they're going to make the forward movement from right here where we're standing. Meanwhile, Kemper, who's really the last to get the order, will start out, and his troops are going to have to march at 90 degrees, not just 45 degrees, and that's because of the ridge line that's off to the left of your view, which we're going to walk up to. Right now, we're under cover. You can't be seen. Some artillery overshots are coming into this line during the cannonade, but we got some protection here during the march until we get up to the top.
And if Bob, if you're looking at Wayne right now, folks, over Wayne's shoulder right now, I can see the Klingel farm. And to that point about Kemper having to come in at that left oblique, Kemper is essentially kind of crossing the Emmitsburg Road around where the Klingel farm is. So imagine how much of an oblique march Kemper has to make compared to Garnett, Armstead, and even the guys in Pettigrew and Trimble's commands.
All right, so what we're going to do now, we're going to leave about the center of General Garnett's line. I'm going to take this. We're going to leave about the center of General Garnett's line, and we're going to walk up. Now, when they start marching, they're going to be at a 45-degree angle because they have to get up to where the copse is located. So let's walk up that way, everybody, and get us up to the top of the ridge. And by the way, the ridge that is directly in front of us is going to be where Deering's battalion of Pickett's divisional artillery. This would be the left-hand side. The extreme left is back there at Woolfolk's Battery where we're at, but this will be the left-hand or southern end of Longstreet's 1st Corps artillery line. These 73 guns that we talked about under this 28-year-old West Pointer, Edward Porter Alexander.
Yeah, and as I said before, people are often surprised at the idea that the artillery is this far forward. Well, folks, look at your field of fire from here. You sure as heck can't see anything. You need to use these ridges to get that field of fire, and that's why the guns are up here and not all the way back there.
And they would have been, they could be on the reverse slope and then pushed up to the top of the slope during the actual cannonade and during the actual bombardment here. And then when Pickett's men pass through them for this artillery, the Confederates are going to have to basically cease fire. And one of the reasons why is because they've got faulty fuses. The Confederate-made fuses aren't very reliable, and the Confederates certainly want to make sure that these don't explode over the heads of their own men while they're walking forward. We're definitely not going at the pace of of Pickett's men here. Common time for Garnett and Kemper, 90 steps a minute with a 28-inch stride. That's a pretty good, and Armstead going at the quick time, which is basically 110. So we're going to get our 10,000 steps in today, everybody.
Wayne, I'm noticing the round tops are becoming prominent again.
Yep, we can see that right behind you. Now we're getting up here.
And you know, there's been a lot of noise made in recent years about Little Round Top not being a great artillery position. Well, Wayne, correct me if I'm wrong, but there are adequate accounts during this charge, particularly from the right of the line, Kemper's guys, Garnett's guys, talking about taking artillery fire from Little Round Top.
Oh, absolutely, and we'll talk a little bit more about that after we do a little recap up here. We've got an account of that from this exact regiment we're walking, from the 53rd Virginia.
I think it was Raleigh Martin who talked about the tramp of walking through the grass, the sound of that. Maybe people can get a sense
part
of
that. Part of the issue with Pickett's charge is that many of these commanders are killed or mortally wounded, so you don't have, you know, some of these accounts that people don't survive. So there's not a lot that you have here from some of the senior level command. Colonel Martin is the path we're walking, 53rd Virginia. He's basically the only regimental commander of Armstead's brigade to survive this attack.
And afterwards writes a fair amount about it. So if you want to be a serious Gettysburg student, studying for the guide exam, Raleigh Martin is a name you got to know.
He's somebody you got to know. All right, so now we're up here to the ridge. This would be the first ridge that Garnett and Kemper's men will pass by. And we've got a monument up here we're going to talk about for a second. Whoops.
As we slide on the ice coming over here.
All right, I'm going to let Bob hold the camera. I'll get in here with Jim and we'll talk a little bit about it. Go ahead.
Well, so first of all, as we get to the top of the ridge, you notice the wind is picking
yes.
up, right? Which is another great feature. Yeah. All right, Bob, if you guys can see the monument behind me, right of the skirmish line of the 1st Massachusetts Infantry, July 2nd, 1863. And of course, we see the diamond of the 3rd Corps under Union General Dan Sickles. Wayne, is this where Dan Sickles takes over the video?
Yeah, this is what we get with Jim and his writings and everything, his interest in Dan Sickles. We can't have a July 3rd tour without doing a Dan Sickles. So this, why is this monument here? We're talking about July 3rd,
I don't know either.
And here we are.
So we just wanted, though, to start, and again, this is something that surprises people when you take them to walk through Pickett's charge, that you see this Union monument representing a skirmish line from July 2nd. Now this, to give you some perspective, we are right now, we're about 300 yards from the Emmitsburg Road. We're about 425 yards or so from the point of woods in the Virginia Memorial over there. So this would have been...
And Bob, you can pan around, he can see that. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, so this would have been a reasonable position for Union skirmish lines on July 2nd, specifically Andrew Humphrey's division, after Sickles' 3rd Corps moved to the Emmitsburg Road. But of course, during the fighting on July 2nd, Sickles' line was pushed back, so this area would not have been occupied by Union skirmishers when Pickett's division came through here on July 3rd. But it's a monument that surprises people, and I'm glad we had a chance to kind of point it out here.
Right. So we're up here at the top of this ridge. This is where the Union Army, of course, was out and pushed off on July 2nd. Now we're at the top of the first ridge that General Garnett's men would have come to, and General Armstead's men with the 53rd Virginia right behind them here. And one of the accounts we have, Jim, from where the artillery is on Little Round Top. So Bob, if you want to just turn that off to the left and you can get yourself over to where Little Round Top is, you can kind of see, you can see right there, right over here exactly where it's at, right there. And the big round top, you can see it as well. The artillery that's up there, there are 6 guns up there under Benjamin Rittinghouse, Battery D, 5th United States Artillery Regiment. And we know that as these troops move further north, the guns will, not all of them will be able to fire. You can pan back around here now. So once the artillery hits this, what does this look like? We know that this is what, it comes from a French word, that means to thread a needle, and that's called enfilading fire. You often hear this. What is enfilading fire? Enfilading fire is fire that passes down a rank of troops. So while we're marching forward, over on our right, over here, the artillery fire from Little Round Top is coming in and not taking out 2 men in a double rank formation, but taking out dozens of troops at one time. And the best way I can try to describe this, I try to describe this to people, is go to a bowling alley and don't look at the pins, the bowling alley, the alley you're on. Look 4 or 5 alleys down at how the bowling pins are stacked in there at an angle, and that's what this looked like. So this artillery from Little Round Top, when Armstead's men get to here, Garnett's men too, but we have this account of the 53rd we're going to talk about. We know that when they get to right here, this artillery fire, the artillerists on Little Round Top are going to have a field day, unfortunately, for these men.
And you use the bowling analogy. There's one guy who literally says a shot came through the ranks like 10 pins in a strike.
Yeah.
I mean, he literally talks about that. Yeah.
And Raleigh Martin writes, and we've talked a lot about Colonel Martin, but we know why, because he survives this attack, and we have documentation for him. In the Southern Historical Papers, he puts out an account that says, I saw every man of Company F, Captain Henry Edmonds, now a distinguished member of the Virginia Bar, thrown flat to the earth by the explosion of a shell from Round Top. But every man who was not killed or desperately wounded sprang to his feet, collected himself, and moved forward to close the gap made in the regimental front. So this is one shell took out an entire company of men, and that would have been about 30, 35 men, and then you figure those men that aren't desperately, and he says desperately wounded. So men that are partially wounded are still going forward here. We got a lot of walking wounded soldiers here, but that happened somewhere right along in here. So right here where we're standing.
And so next time somebody tells you Little Round Top was not an effective artillery position, that's not true. It clearly played a part in what we know today as Pickett's charge. Now, as we get closer to Cemetery Ridge, yes, it's true, Rittenhouse's guns then will have increasingly difficulty and ultimately not be able to fire into Pickett's flanks, but at this point in the charge, very much still playing with effect.
Now, we're going to leave here. We're going to move and head east, and I'm going to take this and just kind of turn it around, Bob, and without trying to get everybody dizzy. There's the Kadori barn and the Kadori house.
And look how the view has changed.
And just tremendous openness area where we're at. Kemper's men off here to the right. Here's where the Rogers house would have stood during the time of the battle. Over here is Klingel. These are all places that Jim has pointed out. And
you know what we should point out? How about McGilvery's artillery line?
Yeah, the line for Freeman McGilvery, artillery line just off of where the PA monument is located. So yes, yep. Now we're going to walk forward here and go down into where this orchard is. And this is probably the #1 question we're going to talk about, where Pickett was located. We'll mention that when we get down there, Jim.
Bob has already asked us about that this morning, so we got to reward Bob.
He's going to get his answer right here. Right. So let's move down here. Let's all move forward. Now in the summertime, you can walk this as a path. There is a cut path that the park keeps maintained here. And this would be, we just picked up about where the 53rd Virginia comes up to the top of this hill and moves. So this pathway is roughly on where the center of Armstead's brigade would have been. Now, Jim, one of my favorite stories here in Pickett's charge, and I'm going to cover it while we're walking down here because it happened somewhere down in here where we're at, is the company commander of Company C of the 28th Virginia Infantry Regiment, and his name was Michael Spessard. And Captain Spessard, the company commander of that company, was from Newcastle, Craig County, Virginia, and his son, Ezekiel Spessard, 18 years old here in the Battle of Gettysburg, was a member of his company. Now, there are a lot of people that are in Pickett's charge that have family members or relatives that are here. And Captain Spessard is noted in the official brigade report of Garnett's brigade, written by Charles Peyton, who's the commanding officer major. because Garnett doesn't survive this attack. And basically, Major Peyton says that Captain Spessard came across his son. His son in this line is wounded by artillery. He's mortally wounded, dies here. And Captain Spessard stops long enough to give him a canteen full of water and look at him. And then he'll continue forward in the assault for July 3rd, 1863, where he performs heroic deeds. According to the official records, he charges with his sword there, gets up inside the angle, and the sword is actually wrestled out of his hands by 2 Union soldiers here on July 3rd, 1863. And then Captain Spessard gets back to the Confederate line. So he's not captured here, and he survives the American Civil War and is buried down in Virginia. But what a great story, and it makes you think about the human aspect. Here's a father seeing his son mortally wounded here under his command on July 3rd, 1863. So a lot of stories for here, and we can't cover them all today. Now, we just came back down into this low area, and if you look where we're at, you can see the Kadori barn and house. We'll stop here just a second, Jim. And you're right, the Kadori barn right behind you, and right off over here to the left, you can't see where the copse of trees are. You can barely see the Bryan farm and house up in the distance there. And then I'll pan off over here. Let's see. You can see the round tops. So you're getting fire from the round tops, but right here in front of us, you're not taking much fire right here. So let's move up a little. There's a replanted orchard here. Yeah. Let's come up to where that is. Now, when you look off over here to the left, let's see if we can pan over here. You're going to get a glimpse when we get up to the top of this ridge, maybe, of Pettigrew's men. But it's been interesting. Most of what we've covered here, there's no way you're going to see any of those troops. You wonder why everybody at Pickett's Charge writes, where's all the, where are the people? And it's because the terrain here masks how people can see.
And then not only the terrain, but then you have smoke covering the entire field from the
that's another thing, Jim. That's a very good point you made, because that's another thing that we forget a lot about, is how smoke covered this battlefield really was. All the black powder gun smoke at the time of the Civil War, there's no such thing as smoke as gunpowder. So basically you don't see very much with all that artillery. Maybe we'll go right up here to the top part of this ridge, and we'll get in this replanted orchard here at the Kadori farm. Here's the farm right next to us. Now, once again, we've said it multiple times, the barn is not the original barn that was here during the battle. This barn, it looks like it gets constructed about 1882. The farmhouse, and this is under the National Park Service, they own it. The farmhouse was here during the time of the battle, but there's an extension, only the front part of it, the front that faces the Emmitsburg Road. The back portion of it was an addition that was added on into the 1870s. And Nicholas Kadori was a butcher here in Gettysburg, and he's the one that actually owned this property.
Probably did not live there.
Probably did not live there.
Probably using it as a tenant property.
And we know, how do we know some of this? Because there are claims put in where the people that are here try to get reimbursement for stuff that's lost at the time of the battle.
So I'm thinking that little swale that we just walked through, if I'm in the infantry, Wayne, that's my last chance to stop and reform.
Right.
Once you hit the top of the hill that we're on now, it's the Emmitsburg Road and Union gunfire beyond.
All right. How about right up in here? I'm going to move off maybe a little to the left, and we'll see where the copse of trees are. We've got General Meade's statue and the angle, Emmitsburg Road, right over here in front of us. Maybe we'll come just off over here to the left. There's the copse clumps of trees right there. All right. So here we are. We're right next to the Emmitsburg Road. We're going to hold up here and talk a little bit about General George Pickett, if we can. And because this is, and Bob has asked us, this is the number one question probably asked us. You want to hold this here? There you go. All right. Go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead. So, yes, where was Pickett during Pickett's charge? It's a very commonly asked question, and unfortunately the answer is not nearly as easy and straightforward. This was a question that was asked among the veterans afterwards, because while over on the left end of the attack, Pettigrew leading a division, Trimble leading a half division, seemed to have been in the thick of the charge. Both men were wounded during the course of the assault. George Pickett and his staff came out from this charge unscathed, and you really could not find anybody afterwards who seemed to have a common consensus on where Pickett was during Pickett's charge. Now, Wayne has talked a little bit about formations and tactics. We should point out right off the bat, as a division commander, Pickett's role was not to be in front of the troops. That's what your brigade commanders are for. Pickett's role as a division commander was to be behind the division and kind of be like a traffic cop, kind of directing traffic and kind of seeing the big picture. So we don't really know where Pickett was during Pickett's charge. There were a lot of accusations. Some accusations had him shirking all the way behind the lines, drinking. Other accounts suggested that he was further down the road here towards the Sherfy Peach Orchard, kind of directing traffic from that direction. But ultimately, some of the staff officers got together and they ultimately sort of came to a general conclusion, which I think Wayne and I generally agree with. Pickett probably got somewhere in the vicinity of where we are now, kind of this last ridge before the Emmitsburg Road. He would have been close enough to still send a few messages and couriers. There's one account where he realizes the left flank is in trouble, the right flank is in trouble, and he sends a message back to Longstreet to get some help for his flank, so we know he's active doing that. But there's some indication that Pickett would have gotten here, and if you can kind of see behind us, this last ridge before the Emmitsburg Road and Cemetery Ridge beyond. I'll add, too, that many people assume, because the cyclorama painting puts Pickett near the Kadori barn, many people assume that George Pickett got all the way up to the Kadori barn over here. I personally think with bullets flying and Union troops on the other side of the Emmitsburg Road, and the fact that Pickett got out unscathed, I tend to think Pickett did not get as far as the Kadori barn. So we kind of come to the conclusion that he was right about here. I don't know, Wayne, did I miss anything?
Yeah, and we should say that the earliest maps, the Batchelder isometric map, shows this orchard, but later apparently the orchard was taken out.
Yeah.
So you don't see it in some of the later maps. Yeah. Luckily, the Park Service has replanted it to where it was. This, to me, is right in the center of this division. This is where Pickett would have been. It's a logical place for him to be. And I think the best evidence we have, basically, is here. I mean, there's accounts of him being clear down at the Peach Orchard.
Back over there behind the rocks.
I don't think any of this, I don't see how any of this is, unless he rode around. He's on a horse.
Well, we should mention that, too. You're mounted, you're going to ride around.
Yeah. And his staff is mounted. The reason why Pickett is questioned is because, and by the way, he's not questioned until later on, until mostly in the post-war era. But, you know, why is it? Where is he? Well, unless you got an earlier account.
No, I think that's probably right.
I mean, he's not questioned as his brave or anything, but no member of his staff is killed or wounded at Gettysburg, and he's not killed or wounded at Gettysburg in an attack where his troops actually lost. So then there's some question later on, well, where is he? Well, and he's you know, where he should be.
Yeah.
I mean, I think.
And he's getting all the glory.
Right.
Pickett's charge.
Right. That's right.
Pickett's charge, and people are kind of starting to go, well, wait a minute, where was Pickett during Pickett's charge? So, folks, post-war battles, what some people call the Second Battle of Gettysburg, are sometimes almost more interesting than the battle itself.
I remember when I try to say, well, I'll use Longstreet's assault today. Try to use Longstreet's assault today. Well, it's Longstreet's assault. It's really not Pickett's charge. That way, Pettigrew, Trimble. And I went through a whole lecture one time, or a whole presentation, and at the end of it, somebody said, when are you going to talk about day 3? You know? because they thought I was talking about day 2. So if you can't beat them, Jim, join them and call it Pickett's charge, because that is what everybody else called it. No disparaging remarks against the North Carolinians and the Alabamans. This attack takes in a lot of different states. And once again, on this video, we're doing the Confederate assault. We're not talking, the Union had a tremendous defense here. That's for another day for us to talk about.
We might do other videos on this when it's about 30 degrees warmer. Right. We'll find out.
All right, we're going to move forward. We're going to get down to where the Emmitsburg Road, and that's where really the first rifle fire from the Union line along Cemetery Ridge. This has been artillery fire hitting us as we've been coming over to here. There's Confederate skirmishers out in front, Union skirmishers out in front, but the bulk of the infantry fire comes when the Confederates actually reach this road.
And that's why the failure of the Confederate cannonade was so critical.
Right.
Because if Lee could break up the Union artillery, his men can get across 3/4 of the field unmolested.
Right.
So people always say, oh, Robert E. Lee didn't understand the weaponry. Yes, he did. The idea to break up the Union artillery was to get us this far without taking casualties. And of course, we know it failed, but that was the idea behind the plan.
Right. All right, we're going to walk up here. I'll take this out of your hands, Bob, and we'll walk.
My Jimmy's got rustled there a little bit. That's a topic I feel strongly about.
You got.
I think the icicles in my brain are starting to finally melt here.
Now, we should say, every step we took going across here, people would have been falling left or right. I can't put into words, I don't think we can, what this must have been like, because these lines, huge swaths of people are being taken out of these lines. And there is some semblance, I think, of order while we're getting up to here. Once these men cross the Emmitsburg Road, it's going to be very difficult to keep any order to any type of line here. A lot of traffic going on the road today. All right, we're going to walk our way a little north. Then when we get up here, we'll pan around and show about where we think Pettigrew's men is. They're going to join the left of Pickett's division. Pettigrew's right will join part of this line with the unknown brigade commander here at the Battle of Gettysburg, which we're going to ask Jim to cover a little bit, because you always hear about Kemper, Garnett, and Armstead, the 3 brigade commanders for Pickett's division, but you don't really hear very much about the division Pettigrew, which is Henry Heath, who was wounded on July 1st. And William Dorsey Pender was wounded on July 2nd, so the division behind him is under the command of Major General Isaac Trimble. That would be the left or northern end of this assault. Okay. Here's the angle on the copse of trees. Directly in front of us, General Meade on his statue. A little bit over here to the right. Watch out here, everybody, going through here. Would be the U.S. Regular Monument, so you can see that. Okay. We're going to stop at this opening before we cross, and I'm going to swing the camera around. So there's the copse of trees, General Meade statue, Bryan Farm. We'll move back around here. Okay, and then I'll get next to Jim, and maybe this is where we just came from, back up on top of the ridge line that's over here. I'll show you where the Kadori Farm is. Here's the Kadori Farm. Traffic on the Emmitsburg Road. Okay, you want to hold this? Sure. There you go. All right. Okay, James. So, we're on the left of Pickett's division now. All of these groups are kind of together. We're still following the 53rd Virginia. And then off over here to the left, be the right of your screen, you've got Pettigrew and Trimble coming up. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that, Jim?
Well, sure, I'd be happy to. So, Pettigrew and Trimble, as Wayne mentioned, Pettigrew's division was normally Henry Heath's division, but Heath had been wounded on July 1st, and so Brigade Commander Johnson Pettigrew had been ordered to step up into the ranks. Behind Pettigrew would have been half of Dorsey Pender's division. Pender had been mortally wounded on July 2nd, and so his was under the command of Isaac Trimble on July 3rd. So Bob, if you just pan over just a little bit in that direction, while we've been basically obliquing our way to Cemetery Ridge, Pettigrew and Trimble were more or less coming in with a straight shot, kind of in the field over here on our left, and many of them would end up in kind of the upper angle area around the Abraham Bryan barn, which we'll try to get another shot of later. Anyways, Pettigrew has been promoted from brigade to division command today, and so one of his regimental commanders, a young man by the name of Colonel James Marshall, has been elevated from regimental command to brigade level. Marshall was 24 years old. He was a VMI graduate, grandson of former Chief Justice John Marshall. So like a lot of these guys, comes from an old, storied, old school, blue-blooded Virginia family. But Marshall, temporarily leading Pettigrew's brigade during this day, comes across the Bliss farm, straight in, and right about at the Emmitsburg Road. Now, not where we're standing, but it would have been further down towards our left. Marshall turns to one of the men next to him, and bullets are flying, canister is flying, and Marshall turns to one of the guys and says something to the effect of, "We do not know which of us will be the next to fall when a mini ball comes, hits him in the head, and kills him." Often tell Marshall's story because he will now be one of 3 brigade commanders killed during this charge. And we tend to always focus on the 2 brigade commanders in Pickett's division, but Marshall, over there temporarily commanding Pettigrew's brigade, is very often forgotten in that. So we wanted to give our props and our shout out to James Marshall today. He was considered to be a bright young man with a very promising future, and like so many other people on both sides, north and south, lost his life here on July 3rd.
Now, Marshall went to VMI, right?
Yeah, right.
And that's a good segue for me to go into the story I want to talk about here, because one of my favorite stories, one that we included in our book, is the story of 3 of the regimental commanders here of Pickett's division.
Yeah.
So there are 3 young men, all commanding regiments here in the battle. That would be Waller Tazewell Patton, the colonel of the 7th Virginia Infantry Regiment. He is the great uncle of General George S. Patton Jr. of World War II fame. There's another commander here, Lewis B. Williams. Williams was the commanding officer of the 1st Virginia Infantry Regiment in General Kemper's command, and Robert C. Allen, the commanding officer of the 28th Virginia of General Garnett's command. All 3 of these men, all 3 of them, were graduates of the 1855 class at VMI.
Right.
All 3 of them were roommates in the same room, and when David Hunter burned down VMI, they rebuilt it. They don't change the room numbers, Jim, at VMI. All 3 of these men were lawyers before the war. All 3 of them died here or were mortally wounded in Pickett's charge. What an interesting story. Lewis Williams, the colonel of the 1st Virginia, was mounted on a horse. Remember, Lee gave orders not to be mounted. He had his sword drawn, a bullet struck him in the shoulder, and he fell and impaled himself on his own sword and died here on July 3rd. Colonel Waller Tazewell Patton, the great uncle of George S. Patton Jr. World War II fame, is mortally wounded right here where we're standing on July 3rd, right up against this fence along the Emmitsburg Road. This post and rail fence was very stout. The skirmishers for the Confederate Army couldn't get this close to the Union line, so it was not taken down. Some of it is still standing when they get here. If you're a fan of Gettysburg the movie, Ted Turner plays Waller Tazewell Patton in Gettysburg the movie. So if you're a fan of Gettysburg the movie and you see it, Ted Turner is his character. And Waller Tazewell Patton was about 27 years old. Allen and Williams were both 29 years old here. The average age of a regimental commander in Pickett's division, about 30. So these are younger men, younger men. And Waller Tazewell Patton gets right here. He gets shot and takes a bullet wound in his jaw. Very, very bad wound. He goes over to Gettysburg College and he dies, I think the date is the 15th of July, 1863. He is buried with his brother, the grandfather of George S. Patton of World War II fame, and they are buried together, Waller Caswell Patton, George Patton, who died in 1864 at the Confederate portion of the cemetery in Winchester, Virginia, the Stonewall Cemetery in Winchester, Virginia. This is where they both rest today. But Waller Caswell Patton wrote while he was dying to tell his mother that he was about to die in a foreign land. That he was about to die in a foreign land. That's what he actually wrote to his mother. Huge amount of casualties here where we're at. Can't stress enough. And Jim, let's take on this thing about...
Let's take it on. Bob,
Bob's arms, you can stay there, Bob, but his arm's going to get tired. But anyway, let's take on. There's all kinds of things that are talked about here about whether or not the Confederates, how many do we think got here? And then did the majority of them get out? In this road behind where we're filming, Emmitsburg Road was sunken during the time of the battle. So there's a big thing that says, well, some of the modern authors and everybody are saying, well, most people didn't get out of the road or whatever. What's your take on that? What's your take on that?
First of all, one of the most common questions I often get asked when walking the charges, were the fences here, and were the fences a significant obstacle in the charge? So where fences still stood, and look, we have accounts, as Wayne I think mentioned, indicating that there were fences here. These are not easy fences to knock down, and so what you have when you get here is you start creating more target density, right? More target density, and guys who are going to climb the fence now create a bigger target on the horizon. So look, I certainly think as you get to the Emmitsburg Road, that not only are the casualties mounting, but I do think there are a number of men who say, okay, I'm going to go back. Whether they're walking wounded, whether they're helping a friend, there are accounts that say, you know, what looked like entire squadrons were going back. But having said that, and we've studied the Elliott burial map, which shows...
We'll talk a little bit more about that in our next stop.
Okay, so I won't give that away. But the Elliott burial map and things of that nature do indicate that a large number of soldiers do get across the Emmitsburg Road. I'm not going to put a number on it. Do I think most of them went that way or not? I'm not going to put a number on it. I do think there are equal accounts of both going that way and that way at that point. Wayne, I know you have strong feelings too.
Yeah, I guess my feelings may be a little bit different. I believe that the majority of the Confederates got out of the road and tried to make an attempt to go forward. And majority is a relevant term. Are there men that decide that discretion is the better part of valor and head back to the Confederate line? And the answer is yes. It happens in every battle. But did the majority of the Confederates get across the road and try to attack the Union line? Now, maybe they didn't break into the angle they got there. And I think the deaths, the bodies from the Elliott burial map clearly show us that the majority of the casualties are on the other side of the road. So my view is that the majority of the people got out of this, made an attempt to go forward, and then the gunfire and artillery fire, in most cases, just drove them back across. Some of them going to penetrate that line. We're going to talk about that. But the tremendous amount of rifle fire. After the battle, one of these rails was taken out. Pretty famous account. And in some 16 feet of fence, I think it's around 16 feet, there were 836 holes in 16 feet of one rail that was here. About every 4 inches you put on this fence, you would have come up with a bullet hole or canister, because the artillery that is up along where the angle is today under Alonzo Cushing, we'll talk more about him, is going to fire canister into where this line is.
And we have accounts, guys getting stuck in the fence, guys talking about the fences being an obstacle, and you get people who come out here today and say, oh no, the fences were torn down. That varies. Clearly there are parts of the field where it's
all right, so now what we're going to try to do, I'll take this, we're going to try to cross over the road. You guys go ahead and go.
So we're going down into the sunken Emmitsburg Road.
People can see the back of Bob. Bob, can we get you on camera? Are we allowed to do that? Bob's a real person. Here he is. Thank you. It's okay for you to be on camera, right?
Yes, sir.
You're okay with that? All right.
Absolutely.
Here we go. Jim, here is the area. So we're on the east side of the Emmitsburg Road now, and you mentioned a little bit. We'll show the Elliott burial map.
Okay, good.
Right here, there are some 522 Confederate bodies buried. Then there's another 176, I think, and then like another 106. So the largest deposit of Confederates that are buried by Union soldiers after the battle are buried right along here. Now, these bodies were later retrieved in the general removal of burials. We don't believe there's any here today, but it's right here on this side. And if somebody's killed on the west side of the road, it's not logical you would bring that body over here to the east side of the road. So I think that this clearly shows that in the fields of Pickett's charge, right over behind you, Jim, that's where the majority of the troops are gonna fall, unfortunately, for the Confederates.
No doubt.
No question, the Union Army's putting up stiff fire here, and the Union defense. What do you think those numbers are up there?
Oh, geez.
Total. You think about. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I mean, I'm thinking maybe 6,000. I don't know what the total.
You know, part of it's hard. Obviously, you have Alexander Webb's brigade defending this area of Cemetery Ridge in front of us. You're going to have some of Norman Hall's guys who very often don't get mentioned, kind of up here. And then, Wayne, if you pan down towards the Pennsylvania Monument, in front of the Pennsylvania Monument, you'll see a lone figure on top of a pedestal.
That's a good segue.
That's the Vermont Monument, and that would be representative of George Stannard's brigade in the 1st Corps. So you've got elements of the 2nd Corps here, you've got elements of the 1st Corps further down there, and now as Pickett's men are crossing the road, we've referred to Kemper's brigade on a couple of occasions here. But if y'all kind of look down towards the Vermont Monument and kind of envision the action I'm talking about taking place down there, Kemper's guys, they're making these series of obliques, at one point turned in towards Stannard's Vermonters, and the two sides exchanged some frontal fire before Kemper's guys again continued to move off by the flank and head up towards what we call today the high watermark area. When Kemper's guys did that, General Stannard and some of his officers saw an opportunity to flank them. And so what Stannard did is he sent 2 regiments, the 16th and the 13th Vermont, out from their works and then changed front in this direction, firing into Kemper's right flank and rear. So now not only do you have Pickett's men taking fire from the front, now they are taking fire in the flank as well. Meanwhile, at the same time, further down the road here, Pettigrew and Trimble's left was also taking fire at that moment in their flank from the 8th Ohio and some other Union regiments over here. So in essence, right now, Longstreet's Grand Assault is now suffering from what you might call a double envelopment. And while there are accounts indicating that many of Pickett's men were still optimistic up to this point, I would say defeat is now officially in progress because they're getting hit now from multiple directions.
We're going to start this walk up toward the angle, and we're going to get up and stop right in front of the wall. But we should say that Colonel Martin of the 53rd Virginia, the regiment that we're following, and Armstead, the one we're following in Armstead, are on their feet. Armstead is on his feet. Martin is on his feet. These men are not wounded yet. They're still here, but they've lost men coming up here, and from every step we're taking forward now is where you're going to have the majority of the casualties in Pickett's charge, right across here, for all the commands.
And you know, we haven't mentioned Armstead's famous, he's got the black hat on the sword, which at this point is probably slid down to the hilt.
Yeah, and Jim, there's some kind of debate as to when Armstead actually puts that hat on his sword. We got some accounts that it was put on at the beginning of the attack as sort of a guide. We've got other accounts that it was later as they got up to here. But every step we're taking now, canister fire from the artillery in the line directly in front of us, infantry fire from the rifled muskets of the command, and some of these units had multiple loaded muskets, we should say, off over here to the left.
Well, because in some cases they've just been waiting for these Confederate soldiers to come on.
Right,
I mean, they've been seeing this advance for the last 15 minutes or so, and as Wayne says, just cleaning and loading their muskets. Of course, too, at this point, General Kemper at some point comes back to Armstead.
Right. And asks Armstead to come up and support. So at this moment, we should say that the troops were basically at the double quick. That's 165 steps a minute. The stride is 33 inches. Imagine that. You're 5 feet 8 inches tall. You're a Civil War soldier, and you're trying to make a stride that's almost 3 feet. This is not quite a run, but it's a pretty significant advancement because they're trying to close this gap. And this is a bayonet assault. The last thing in the world you want to do if you're a Confederate commander here is to let the Confederate troops stop and open fire, because that's going to stop the momentum of this assault. You want to make sure that these troops have the fixed bayonets and are moving forward. A bayonet is a weapon of shock here, and you want to jam that bayonet right down the throats of these Union soldiers. If you stop out here and start opening fire, you die. And unfortunately for the Confederates, fortunately for the Union, a lot of these troops, they've lost a lot of the officers. So there's no one really in command here because the officers are being shot down.
I hope, too, that people can appreciate as we make this last push that we are going uphill right now.
We are, yeah.
Because when you look at Cemetery Ridge from a distance, it doesn't look like any sort of elevation whatsoever. But this last push here is uphill. And going into, the teeth of musketry fire that Wayne talked about, or even some canister fire. One guy said it was almost like walking into a hailstorm, and the guys were almost, leaning forward as the fire is just coming back at them.
Let's walk down a little bit to the right, Jim. Let's go down here to where we think Garnett may have been.
Okay.
We'll come back out. This is the copsetry right down. This is the angle itself, and then the copsetry is right here. So go ahead. We'll walk down. Let's go down a little bit. Get us a rough. Then we're going to turn the camera over to Bob, and the two of us will we'll work on it. We'll go a little further. Okay. Yeah, by walking this, you can see that it is a slope, and that's something that I think it's forgetful. When you look from the Union line to Confederate line, you think all this is flat.
Right, exactly.
You don't see any of those undulations in the ground. This is good, Jim. Anywhere you want to go here. Let's turn this over to Bob. Clumps of trees right behind you. 72nd Pennsylvania. Up here where Armstead was mortally wounded. Let's why don't you talk about General Garnett? So we've been following Armstead, but remember, General Garnett's men are in front. So we're right up here, right next to the Union line for July 3rd.
Yeah, so if Pickett's men, Wayne, Bob, if Pickett's men had maintained formations up to the Emmitsburg Road, by the time I think they got through the road, over those fences, getting hit with gunfire, I think formations by this point have more or less broken down. One Union soldier looked into this field and said by this point the Confederates looked almost more like a disorganized mob. And so what I think you've got at this point is the lines kind of mingling. I think you've got Kemper's guys kind of crashing into the stone wall over here. Maybe some of Garnett's guys kind of crashing into the wall over here. Ultimately, one of the casualties of the charge was General Richard Garnett. As we said before, he was mounted on his horse, Red Eye. We can imagine he would make a great target, mounted, coming across this field here. Garnett, though, does seem to have been with his men almost until the end. Colonel Fry, who was again commanding what was Archer's brigade and what was today Pettigrew's division, Fry said as they were getting near the stone wall, he looked across and he could hear Garnett giving an order, but he couldn't understand with all the noise what Garnett was doing, and Garnett kind of shouted over and said, "I'm dressing on you," which again means I'm forming on you and we are pushing forward. somewhere in here, Garnett was killed. Varying accounts. Some said he took a gunfire to the head. Others said he took a round of canister. We don't know. His horse was said to be seen kind of running from the field. But somewhere in here, General Garnett was killed. His body was never identified. Henry Hunt, who knew Garnett, searched for the body the day afterwards. And folks, you got to remember, not only are you disfigured from your wounds, but out here in the hot July sun, these bodies are blackened, they're bloating. Any accoutrements that Garnett had as a general would have been stripped and taken off of him. So they never did identify General Garnett's body. He was probably one of these ones just buried in the huge trench that Wayne talked about and hopefully exhumed at some point, and probably lies as a unidentified in Hollywood Cemetery.
Yeah, he does have a memorial stone that was put up in Hollywood Cemetery. All three of the brigade commander's swords are in the American Civil War Museum, which used to be the former Museum of the Confederacy. Garnett's sword was found in a Baltimore pawn shop and purchased and donated to that. So this, if Armstead could see this through the smoke, as he's coming up with his troops, he would have been able to see red eye. There's a great scene in Gettysburg, the movie, that shows that. Richard Jordan is playing Armstead. He sees the horse of Garnett going back. That's all possible. That could have been possible here because that horse went back. Armstead will get right up to where we're at here as Garnett's men. You got something else you want to cover?
No, I was just going to mention something on Kemper.
Sure. Well, go ahead.
No, well, since Wayne mentioned the movie a couple times, I just want to point out then, we're going to talk about Garnett, we're going to come back to Armstead. Kemper is seriously wounded as well. He takes a gunshot wound kind of in the groin area. He is unhorsed, he is taken back. And since we mentioned the movie, I just want to call out, we often get people on the battlefield who think Kemper is killed in the charge. Because Kemper's last line in the movie is, "They fear my wound is mortal." Well, Kemper did not die of that wound, and he went on to live, I think, later as governor of Virginia and a lot of other political positions and that. But since you mentioned the movie, I just wanted to make sure we didn't forget.
No, that's right. And often the movie is, and people talk about the different accuracies in the movie. There are a couple spots here that I think are pretty much on target. Certainly the horse moving back, Kemper being carried off the battlefield. These are pretty accurate renditions as to actually what happened here. We got to say, we know it's windy out here, everybody. We're doing the best we can. We don't know what it sounds like until we go review the video, but we're doing everything we can. Now, when Armstead gets up to here, him and Colonel Martin are right next to each other. He and Colonel Martin are right next to each other. And basically, he says, well, we can't stay here. And Colonel Martin says, well, then we'll go forward. Under tremendous fire, right here behind me, there's probably two guns of 22-year-old Alonzo Cushing's, Battery A, 4th United States Artillery. Cushing, a graduate of West Point, wounded here in the shoulder, wounded in the groin, and he probably has two guns here, although the accounts vary. Right up near where this stone wall is, and while these soldiers are coming up, unfortunately for Cushing, he's shot through the open mouth by a bullet that goes out the back of his, through his mouth, out the back of his head, and he's killed instantly here at Gettysburg from that last wound that's here. He is being held up, working these guns, firing canister into this line, right as the Confederates are moving forward. On the wall, the flag of the 53rd Virginia, Robert Tyler Jones, the grandson of President John Tyler, is one of the last color bearers, not the last, but one of the last color bearers carrying the 53rd Virginia. We talked about how James Carter mentioned 10 color bearers, 8 of them killed or wounded getting across this field here. Robert Tyler Jones will stand right on this wall and will wave the flag when he's shot down. And that flag is picked up, and then this surge of Confederates going over the wall. This is going to be a conglomerate of Garnett's men, Armstead's men off over to the left of your view, Archer, which would be Fry's brigade, that's here, and then Kemper's men down to the right. So these troops will break this line. There'll just be a small amount of them that'll be able to do
Well, I
that.
was going to ask, so we talked about numbers. What do you think? How many guys, if somebody put a gun to Wayne's head and said pick a number?
You often hear 150 to 300.
I was gonna
it's
say
only a
200.
couple hundred. It's only a couple hundred men.
I was going to say 200.
If it's that men, and very few that make it into the Union line get back. We talked about Michael Spessard. According to the official report, he actually got up into here, somewhere near here, but most of the men aren't able to get back. We're not going to cross over the wall. We're going to be mindful of the resource stepping on the wall, so we're going to go around and end up right back over across here. So Bob, you want to just follow us around, and we'll walk here. We'll go around and go up the path. So right along where the stone wall is for the angle on July 3rd is where we're at. You's looking north right now. So good.
So this area, we should point out this area here, a couple companies of the 71st Pennsylvania.
Yeah, mine with the 71st PA.
As Wayne said, a couple of guns, the Cushing's battery, we're up against the wall. We can quibble over that number. Of course, the monument of the 72nd PA, which is the guy swinging the clubbed musket. That unit was not initially in this forward position, although they did come forward afterwards. And then you see kind of the obelisk here to the 69th Pennsylvania in front of the copse of trees. So just giving you a perspective as we're on this side of the wall.
And we should say, as we're marching through here, what's really incredible, or walking through here, marching, still talking about battle stuff. We should say, while we're walking through here, is that there are Union soldiers that are captured by Confederates right here inside this angle, and then pushed back. Apparently they're unarmed, being thrown back to the back of the lines. Now, how many of them made it back over the Confederate line, I don't know, but it's interesting. There are Union troops captured here on July.
There are, and it's a great story, and I think in the bigger picture, that should remind people that today we portray this as kind of this doomed assault.
Yeah.
If you were here on the Union lines on July 3rd, 1863, you had enough enemy soldiers coming at you to make your future very much in doubt.
Right.
And I think we do a disservice to that when we portray this as being as lopsided as we often do.
Yeah, we didn't talk about that at the beginning, but it's our opinion that this was not a last desperate attack. This was the next logical step for Lee to make based on the information that he had for July 3rd because of the attack here. And clearly this line was broken. The support not come up, and Lee in 2 official reports blamed the artillery, the failure of the artillery. Blame might be a harsh word, but he said that the artillery fire it really didn't accomplish what he said. He's got 2 official reports, one in 1864, one in July of 1863, and the artillery is Lee's reason why he thinks the failure of that coordinated artillery to take out Union artillery in the cannonade and then to support the attack going forward is why he says he thinks the attack
And it
failed.
ties back to what we said before. If you knock out the Union artillery, now your infantry can get across 3/4 of this field basically undamaged.
Right.
But when the Union guns were still on the field, that created a lot of the casualties we've talked about on the march here. So we're kind of tying up all the loose ends.
All right, let's go up past the angle. We'll ask Bob to carry the camera. Go ahead. All right. Now, in the view of the camera, this will be the left. So you're at the dividing line between where Pettigrew's men are located and where Pickett's men are located. Can you get it with the camera? Don't hurt yourself up here. I'll take it. Okay. All right. Okay. Here's the Bryan Farm off over to our left. So all 2nd Union Army Corps. And Jim, I think we ought to go. Why don't we go over there near the 69th PA, is that?
Okay, sure.
And talk about the collapse. We just brought the Confederates, we were bringing them over to the wall, so why don't we, go ahead. Copse of trees and the guns for Cushing. Monument to where Armstead fell, we'll talk a little bit about that. Wow, what a lot of wind. I'm sure the mic is getting a lot of wind. All right, we're gonna get, yeah, I think right here, maybe the right. You want to talk about the right of the 69?
Sure.
Okay. Let's just let me pan around here. So you got the Kadori farm back there behind. Here's the 72nd. We were standing right on the other side of the wall. The angle itself, right there. Bryan Farm in the Union line north of where the angle is. Guns of Cushing. At least the position. We'll talk a little bit about that. All right, Jim. Why don't you talk about the collapse? So we're bringing the Confederates over. The Union Army is defending this.
Yeah, so over on my right would be the 69th Pennsylvania, and they were in front of the area known as the Copse of Trees. So we've talked about the gap in the Union position immediately behind us. We've talked about Kemper, Garnett, and Armstead's brigades kind of crashing at the wall here. But as they start to come over, what would have been, you see various descriptions of it, kind of a very low sort of stone wall, kind of a fence running along the ridgeline here. As the Confederates start to come over, 3 companies of the 69th Pennsylvania are probably ordered to refuse their flank back in this direction, creating a little bit more of that hole for Armstead's guys to come through. 69th Pennsylvania was a bunch of Irish immigrants from the Philadelphia area. Their colonel, Dennis O'Kane, had told his men literally not to fire until you can see the whites of the enemy's eyes. So they were exchanging gunfire with the Confederates. Now they've got almost some fighting in close range right up against the wall. 69th Pennsylvania is also probably taking some friendly fire from Cowan's battery behind them. So they're getting it from both the front and the rear. But as Armstead's guys come crashing over the wall, recently promoted General Alexander Webb, whose brigade was defending this point here, 2nd Corps, Webb tries to get some members of the 72nd Pennsylvania, which were a little bit further behind Wayne, tries to get the 72nd Pennsylvania to charge towards the wall, but in the noise, in the confusion, and with Webb really being new to command, the men probably didn't recognize him. Webb can't get the 72nd PA to charge forward, so Webb is going to run over here and join in with the 69th Pennsylvania. So you've got those refused companies of the 69th shooting into Armstead's guys. The 71st is falling back. They're shooting into Armstead's guys. Eventually the 72nd will come forward. And folks, it's a shooting gallery. It's a wonder that any of these men got out of here alive. Bullets flying in every direction. And although this breakthrough by the Confederates is going to be one of the most iconic moments of not only the Battle of Gettysburg, but the entire Civil War, it's only got to be a momentary thing. It's 200 guys are not going to overpower thousands of Yankee opponents. Wayne, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I'm going to swing this around, and maybe Bob can come over here and hold this to right here, and you and I can stand right out here in front, because when Jim is talking about, when he's talking about the right of the 69th collapsing, at the same time the line collapses, and let's remember the Confederates break through a couple places here. Right. This isn't the only place that they break through. When the Confederates break through, the Union troops that are over here behind the Copse of Trees, right behind us, they're going to start to come up and try to close off this gap of the Confederates. And right behind us, one of the greatest stories here at Pickett's Charge. It shows you that some of this fighting was hand-to-hand, or very close. Now, we had Michael Spessard's account that the sword was wrestled out of his hand.
Right.
We've got the clubbing monument behind the camera, the 72nd PA. So we know that some of this actually happened. When the 69th collapsed, the flag of the 14th Virginia Infantry Regiment, that's the right of Armstead's line, came right over that stone wall. And the color bearer of the 14th Virginia is right over here behind where I'm located. He gets up to the copse of trees with the flag in his hand, and coming out of the trees is Joseph DeCastro carrying the flag of the 19th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry Regiment, the state color. Union regiments carried two flags. They carried a national color, United States flag, and they carried a state regimental color. Confederate units carried one battle flag, which is 4 feet by 4 feet. The Union flags are 6 feet by 6 feet 6 inches. They are big. So the flag of the 14th is right behind me. Joseph DeCastro, the 19th Virginia, runs out of the point of woods, and out of the copse of trees, and he's standing face to face with the color bearer of the 14th Virginia. And at that moment, he takes the staff, crosses staffs with the color bearer of the 14th Virginia, knocks him to the ground, takes the flag right out of his hand. And for that act, Joseph DeCastro gets the Medal of Honor. He's only 18 years old here in the Battle of Gettysburg. His father was born in Spain, and he is the first Hispanic man to be awarded the Medal of Honor in the history of the United States. And he got that award in 1864. He dies in 1892 in New York City. And that happened right over here behind where we are standing. That's how close, Jim, this action is. Now, meanwhile, behind the camera, Armstead and Martin are rushing forward past Cushing's guns, or in where Cushing's guns are located.
Some debate.
To try to get in there. And meanwhile, Webb and the Philadelphia Brigade are defending this. So why don't we turn and we'll just turn it and go over here. And let's head over here to where Armstead goes down. Then we're going to hand it back to you, Bob, and let Jim and I finish off. Which angle do you want? You want to shoot this way, or what do you think?
You want to shoot back the way we came?
Yeah,
okay.
Let's do, so we can see where it is. Now, these guns represent Cushing's battery. Remember, he had two down at the wall, and there's still, we think two, and there's still a debate as to whether these guns were actually here or whether they were moved out. So why don't you come right in here and just hold this right in here. This is where Armstead goes down. Whoops, here we go. And then Jim and I will stand out here. We'll cover the last part of this assault. So we've started where the 53rd Virginia was. We brought Armstead and Garnett. Garnett has been mortally wounded. Armstead and Martin are coming over the wall right here. And so, Jim, now we're at the end, basically, of this attack for July 3rd.
Yeah, I mean, General Webb, writing to his wife a couple of days later, said that when he saw those rebels coming over the fence, he felt like the Army of the Potomac was whipped. And I think that gives you another sense of how desperate these last couple of moments were. But as we said, you know, George Meade, Second Corps, these guys have reinforcements to spare as they come in and they kind of overwhelm Armstead's forces. Wayne, do you have any thoughts, though, on where Armstead was wounded? I know that's a topic of debate.
The monument over here behind us was put up in the 1880s. It was put up based on a stake that John Batchelder, the government historian, put in the ground where somebody said he saw Armstead fall. Armstead probably fell closer to the wall. I think that's pretty known. But he and Colonel Martin will get up into this area right over here behind us. Colonel Martin will take a bullet that'll go through both legs. He'll take a second bullet in the calf, and he will go down. Armstead will be wounded in the left, probably the left arm and right leg, and he will go down. And Armstead's wound is not mortal, but he'll die, not believed to be mortal, but he'll die on July 5th, 1863 at the George Spangler Farm, which is owned by the Gettysburg Foundation, the 11th Union Army Field Corps Hospital. That's where he'll go. Martin will be carried out. He'll go down to Baltimore. He'll be exchanged, and he actually lived, Jim, until 1912. But the flag of the 53rd, what we've been following, going to come right up into here behind us. The last color bearer was a man by the name of Hutchings Carter. Hutchings Carter was an officer in the Chatham Grays, Company I, the 53rd Virginia. He'll be the last man to grab that flag in the 53rd Virginia. Remember, we think there are about 10 color bearers here. And Hutchings Carter run forward with that flag. He'll get right up to here. There are so many Union soldiers here, he'll throw up his hand, surrender. And the accounts say that he leaves the flag within the abandoned guns. The flag of the 53rd Virginia left in the abandoned guns. Hutchings Carter has 17 bullet holes in his clothes and not a mark on his body, according to James Carter, one of the color bearers of the 53rd Virginia. The last man to have his hands, and the Confederate soldier to have his hands on that flag. And that flag today in the American Civil War Museum in Richmond, Virginia, it still exists. Hutchings Carter was the last guy to carry it. 10 color bearers, Jim, and about 8 of them, according to Carter, killed, wounded in the assault here. We just covered most of them. That flag ending up right here. Pickett's charge. It's taken us a long time on this video to get you from the Virginia Memorial over here to the Union line along Cemetery Ridge. One Confederate account said we were 19 minutes coming. 19 minutes coming. So this attack is far shorter than what Jim and I have walked it today. Within an hour, 50 minutes or so, the beginning and the end. And the high water mark, as this has been called here, this is where you're standing. And the Confederates right here, those men that are in this angle, almost all of them killed, wounded, or captured. The Confederates retreat, and the losses here are tremendous, Jim. I don't know if you want to talk any about that, but it's just tremendous.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately, as with many individual actions, we don't know exact numbers, but numbers of total Confederate losses during the charge, when you add together Pickett, Pettigrew, Trimble, again, Wilcox and Lang, who we didn't talk a lot about today, those casualties might be as high as 6,000 killed, wounded, missing, captured. I do want to point out, though, we mentioned the story of Alonzo Cushing, who was killed around this spot. There were maybe as many as, and we guesstimated, maybe as many as 1,900 to 2,000 Union casualties during the charge as well. And I want to call that out. I want to pay attention to that, because too often we just make it sound like bullets were flying in one direction. Now, there were a lot of Union casualties in the assault as well. So as Wayne mentioned, you know, not only a tremendous loss of life, I though feel very strongly that in terms of the Battle of Gettysburg, this is the turning point of the battle.
Yeah, to me, you know, there's no question of it. On the night of July 2nd, Lee had combat power to attack anywhere he wanted. On the night of July 3rd, he doesn't have it. Every division he's got has been used in the battle. It's pretty well, you know, he's pretty well devastated these troops. On July 4th, they'll wait around. Union Army will not make an attack, and in the evening of the 4th and 5th, the Confederates will pull out to fight another day. The Union Army will pursue them, and the war is going to go on. Everybody, you know, a lot of tours I have, the people that I've had over the years have thought that the war ended right here. They think that the Civil War ends here, and of course we know it goes on until April of 1865. Yes, but really, the recovery of the Army of Northern Virginia here, pretty much devastating. Pickett, almost every one of his regimental commanders, maybe with one exception, are killed or wounded in this assault on July 3rd. Not only is he losing men, he's lost experienced officers, and he can't really replace them.
And so we've given people that experience today, walking the field. We didn't talk a lot about the planning and the objectives. We did a little bit, but we should always remember, too, the famous saying that was attributed to George Pickett. When somebody said, General Pickett, why did Lee's army lose at Gettysburg? And Pickett, with a twinkle in his eye, responded, well, I think the Yankees had something to do with it. So hopefully we'll come back here for another video to talk about the Yankees. But guys, you know, so many people treat Pickett's charge, the Pickett, Pettigrew, Trimble charge as this, you know, doomed to fail and that sort of thing. Very much in the doubt right up until the last minute, and as we said before, clearly the turning point of the Battle of Gettysburg. And I think that makes it still an iconic moment. I hope people appreciate it as much as we do.
Right, and Jim, and I also want to say that if you're not physically injured here at Gettysburg, wounded here at Gettysburg, you're going to be psychologically maimed. We can't tell you enough. PTSD, the problems these soldiers had, not just at Gettysburg, but after Gettysburg, living with this. You're going to be living with Pickett's charge, seeing your friends. Eppa Hutton, the Colonel of the 8th Virginia, asked to come back, walk this battlefield. Hutton was severely wounded in the leg here at Gettysburg. His horse was killed here. He'll never come to Pickett's charge. He was asked to come to Pickett's charge, and he said he could never, quote, summon the courage to do so, end quote. That here fell Captain Bissell, here fell Captain Ayres, here fell Captain Grayson, the best friends he ever had in the whole world. All of them killed or mortally wounded here in Pickett's charge. So the living with this, the psychological aspect is tremendous. We can't put that into words. This attack, 3 to 4 o'clock, July 3rd, over by 4 p.m. The Confederates will pull out and live to fight another day, but devastating results. We have covered Pickett's division, the 53rd Virginia Infantry Regiment of Armstead's brigade. We'll have to do another Walking Wednesday video on the Union defense. We're not taking anything away from the Union defense, and from Pettigrew and Trimble from the northern half. Right. Jim, on behalf of the Gettysburg Foundation, I just want to say thank you very much. You're volunteering your time to come out here and do this video. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for the invite.
I just also want to say we appreciate Bob behind the camera. Bob. Thank you for rounding up and coming here and being with us.
You're welcome.
And participating with us. We appreciate it. For you folks here, Walking Wednesday series, once a month, we're going to be out here doing this. And once again, mindful of the resource. We're doing it here in the wintertime when we're not going through crops. Please subscribe, like, follow us on the social media channels. Look for the videos that are on Facebook and the YouTube channel. That's where they're going to rest for the Gettysburg Foundation. The mission of the foundation, the philanthropic partner of the Gettysburg National Military Park and the Eisenhower National Historic Site. And we're grateful we can help the park preserve, protect, and interpret this great battlefield, Jim, that you and I are able, just a blessing to go out and work on every day we want. So we thank you very much.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add?
I'm good. My ears are frozen, folks.
All right.
I'm good.
We're going to go. Thank you very much.